For the people that are contradicting the fact that the Quran was not man-made, we have two things to ask you. Firstly, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not know how to read or write. Now, this did not stop him from conveying his message. He was able to speak it because he knows all of the knowledge in the Quran. Second, not have databases or computers at the time when the Prophet was there. But since now we do, we can research into the Quran. We can see how many times a word was repeated and see if there's any correlations between these words. So, after finding out all of these correlations between these words that are repeated the exact same times in the Quran, let me ask you this. Does it seem like a coincidence? Does it seem like the Quran was man-made in that time when there was barely anyone that can read or write? Malaika, which means angels, and shayateen, which means demons, are both repeated 88 times in the Quran. Then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction. Al-Raghba, which means wish, and Al-Ja'uf, which means fear, are both repeated 8 times. It is stated in an ayah that we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. As-Salihat, which means good deeds, and As-Sayat, which means wrongdoings, are both repeated 167 times. Another ayah states, Alif Lam Ra, a book whose verses are perfected and then presented in detail from one who is wise and acquainted. Al-Dunya, which means mundane life, and Al-Ajira, which means the afterlife, are both repeated 115 times. Al-Lisan, which means tongue, Al-Ma'diyah, which means sermon, are both repeated 25 times. Al-Hayat, which means life, and Al-Maut, which means death, are both repeated 145 times. Al-Akl, which means intellect, and An-Nur, which means divine light, are both repeated 49 times. Al-Muslimat, which means Muslim women, Al-Muslimin, which means Muslim men, Al-Yihad, which means effort, are all repeated 41 times. Al-Yusr, which means difficulty, and Al-Usr, which means ease, are both repeated 12 times. Ash-Shida, which means pressure, Sabr, which means patience, are both repeated 102 times. Qul, which means say, Qalu, which means said, are both repeated 332 times. Jaza, which means reward, Marfira, which means forgiveness, are both repeated 117 times. Al-Rahman, which means merciful, Al-Rahim, which means graceful, are both repeated 57 times. Al-Jahr, which means in public, Alanya, which means notoriety, are both repeated 16 times. The word Sahr, which means month, is mentioned 12 times in the Quran, just as the number of months there are in a year. The word Yawn, which means day, in singular, is mentioned 365 times in the Quran, just as the number of days there are in a year. The word Ayam, which means days, in plural, is mentioned 30 times in the Quran, just as the number of days there are in a year. The word Ayam, which means days, in plural, is mentioned 30 times in the Quran, just as the number of days there are in a month. An-Nafa means benefit. Al-Fasad means corruption, and they're both repeated 50 times. Ar-Rajul, which means man, Al-Marra, which means woman, are both repeated 24 times. The word Bahr means water, is mentioned 32 times in the Quran. The word Bar, which means earth, is mentioned 13 times in the Quran. Now, we take both of these numbers and we add them together, we would get 45. If we take the number of words Bahr divided by the total number of words, earth and water, multiply it by 100%, it will give us 71%. And if we take the word Bahr, which means earth, and divide it by the total number of words, earth plus water, and multiply that by 100%, it will give us 28%. And as we may already know, the percentage of water in our planet is 71%, and the percentage of earth in our planet is 28%. These numbers are not a coincidence. So, after finding out all of these correlations between these words that are repeated the exact same times in the Quran, let me ask you this. Does it seem like a coincidence? Does it seem like the Quran was man-made in that time when there was barely anyone that can read or write? You ask yourself.